Yeah. Now he's like, open it now. I just spoke briefing with President Trump on the phone, says Julia Manchester, White House correspondent for The Hill. He said he is not ruling out sending ground troops into Iran if they do not make a deal. He also said no infrastructure targets are off the table for the U.S. strikes if no deal is reached. He is trying to do, he's trying to utilize war crimes, okay, and making Iran unlivable for 93 million people as a bargaining chip. He's basically saying we will turn Iran into Gaza. The Dahia doctrine that we saw in both Lebanon and Gaza, Donald Trump is saying he will do to Iran. So far, Iran has retaliated in kind. Trump has also extended the deadline for Iran by an additional 24 hours. In a post on Truth Social, he wrote, Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. This doesn't spell a lot of confidence. Donald Trump has extended his deadline approximately 10 times at this point. The Macias says this is his fifth extension of the deadline. That's probably the real number. I'm exaggerating, which once again shows that perhaps he is not as confident in his ability to get a deal. It's once again an unstoppable force against an immovable object. Donald Trump keeps saying, oh, we're just going to keep blowing your shit up. And in the process, we're going to make life uninhabitable in Iran. So you better recognize, you better learn your lesson, and you better come to the table, or else we're going to do maximum terrorism, right? A timeline of power plant day deadlines. March 22nd, Trump issues a 48-hour deadline. March 23rd, deadline is extended to March 27th. March 26th, deadline is extended to April 6th. April 5th, deadline is extended to April 7th. So this is, I guess, the fifth time. Yeah. He added an additional extension, or the sixth extension. Sorry. Breaking for the sixth time. Sorry. For the sixth time since March 22nd, the U.S. President Trump extends his deadline to obliterate Iran's power plants unless the Strait of Hormuz is fully reopened. The deadline has now been delayed by 34 hours and goes from Monday 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Tuesday. Things are going well. Now, obviously, the reason why he's doing it is because he thinks he can threaten Iran. But for Iran, their response is always the same. If you blow up our shit, we will blow up the entire world's shit. You blow up our power plants, we will blow up Israeli power plants. We will blow up the Gulf power plants. We will destroy the refineries, right? So they have still a ways to go on the escalation ladder in retaliation to the American and Israeli escalations. That's where we're at.
Country. And the president, again, told them that support and help was on the way. And so it appears that was the help the president was talking about. And again, as all of this is taking place, now that we zoom out 3 months later, the president is offering the Iranians a diplomatic solution to end this conflict. The same offer that he gave the Iranians before Operation Epic Fury began. Exactly. And remember, we know that at the negotiating table before this operation began, the opening position of the Iranian regime is that we have 460 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, enough to make 11 nuclear bombs. And the president, understanding the country's ballistic missile program and their nuclear aspirations, ultimately ordered this operation. Well, more than 35...
Yeah, this stuff is propaganda, 100%. Iran said that they would... concede on the nuclear enrichment. Iran said that they would concede on everything, according to the Omani negotiators and other mediators that were in the room when these conversations were taking place. Iran has already conceded on this stuff before to Barack Obama. You know, all this, it shows exactly what the Trump administration's goals were here, right? They wanted to engage in perfidy, just as they did in the 12-Day War. They wanted to utilize the negotiations process to do a first strike, while the Iranians were unaware that America would or Israel would strike them at all. That's it.
Days later, the president once again is offering the Iranians a diplomatic solution. And again, he tells Fox News in a phone call earlier today, he thinks he'll be able to get a deal with Iran by tomorrow. He says he thinks there's a good chance tomorrow. They are negotiating now. But again, the president goes on to tell me you're going to see bridges and power plants dropping all over their country if they're unwilling to make a deal.
So incredible reporting, Trey. But it's interesting because President Trump told you that he was thinking optimistic, it sounds like, that there could be a deal tomorrow. But did you also sense a frustration in his talking about the negotiations? Because Iran has never changed their tune. They so far have yet to show any inkling of good faith negotiating, but maybe something has changed in the last 24 hours?
The short answer is no, it doesn't.
I'm going to be honest. Trump is consistently the least reliable orator. Okay. If Iran and Iranian officials, not about like the IRGC statements about the operation that took place recently, but like in general about the negotiations, if Iranian officials are the most reliable, Trump is literally the least reliable. Okay. There are like, I would trust Steve Witkoff, even though I don't trust him at all, but I would still trust Steve Witkoff a lot more than I would trust Trump. And only because he just doesn't fucking know what's going on. And he just consistently says contradictory shit, sometimes in the same sentence. Okay. Sometimes he's saying things specifically to manipulate the market and have some of his immediate family members make a lot of money. And in other instances, he's just deranged and saying totally inconsistent shit with regular frequency. In one moment saying negotiations are going great, and in the next moment saying, if you don't open the Strait of Hormuz now, I'm going to blow up your power plants. Okay? He is like the worst guy to listen to get a decent understanding of what's going on. Genuinely.
Doesn't appear anything major has changed.
And it sucks because he is the one guy that millions of Americans listen to and take his word as though it's fucking the gospel.
As it relates to the way that the Iranians are negotiating, what's changed is the increase in pressure that continues. President Trump ordered, remember, a strike against the B-1 bridge, a new bridge in Iran that the Iranians, according to intelligence officials here, were going to use to transport military equipment. And he told me on the phone that as he was trying to get a deal, the Iranians were trying to push off the negotiating timeline, saying next Tuesday we'll meet, for example. And the president said, no, next hour, because this is a president who wanted to get a deal. He wants to get the job finished. And ultimately, the Iranians were trying to stretch out that negotiating timeline, and the president ordered the strike against this critical infrastructure in Iran, again, to send a message that the United States is not playing games on the battlefield or at the negotiating table. And so the sense that I got from President Trump is that he is very serious as it relates to these threats against the Iranian regime when it comes to their unwillingness to make a good faith agreement, despite the fact that the president has given them multiple off-ramps. And again, he tells me that he ideally will take Iranian oil if they are unwilling to make an agreement. And so that is a major development in this conflict. And the president making very clear in his post on Truth Social that Iranian power and energy infrastructure will be targeted in the days ahead if Iran doesn't make a deal tomorrow.
Based on your conversation then, Trey, especially when you consider there has been no evidence whatsoever that the regime is trustworthy. They make deals all the time. They say things all the time, and they never, ever, ever follow through. Was that your sense in listening to the president? And if that's so, it seems to me like 24 hours from now, we're going to hear a lot more about bombing.
Yes, the president understands the deal very well, based on what I gathered from the conversation. And he said primarily we're talking about the Strait of Hormuz.
Talk we cut out the middle of negotiations to bomb Iran. What are you talking about? I mean, what do you think? I mean, they're fucking doing regime propaganda for a guy who is unimaginably, unbelievably inconsistent. It's not a very easy thing to sane wash. Okay, sane washing terrorism is a brilliant tactical move. Yeah, Israel's systematic bombing of Iran's key industrial infrastructure, steelworks, petrochemicals, pharmaceuticals, is designed to destroy Iran's economy, prevent post-war reconstruction, setting the country on the path to become a failed state. That's all this is. That's precisely what they're doing. They can't win. They can't win like their stated military objectives. They can't win on that. So they're just trying to do maximum damage to the Iranian population. This is exactly how Israel operated in Gaza. Exactly how Israel operated in Gaza. It's exactly how Israel operated in Lebanon. When they can't achieve their stated military objectives, just fucking kill as many people as possible. Do maximum damage to the civilian infrastructure. Do maximum damage to the civilians. It's an insanely cruel way to operate. And unfortunately, there is very little pushback from even America and Americans towards this kind of endeavor. It's cruel. It's dumb. It doesn't even deteriorate their striking capabilities, ironically enough. All you do is just destroy the lives and livelihoods of 93 million fucking people. It's completely psychotic. Israeli veteran war correspondent argues that Israel's likely and most decisive plan now in Iran is to enact the Dahiyya Doctrine, exactly, in areas where regime supporters and their families live, ordering them to evacuate and blowing up those neighborhoods. Israel and America only does this when they're losing, for the record, okay? And they can't do regime change. They can't actually balkanize the country. They can't actually deteriorate Iranian strike capabilities. So all they're doing is fucking terrorism. It's insane. And no one ever turns around and says, hey, can you stop doing this shit? The only reason why people are at least a little bit more critical this time around is because Iran is a sovereign state and not like a paramilitary force comprised entirely of occupied peoples, right? Or a paramilitary force that's like the only standing conventional forces that can try to push back against Israeli incursions, like in Lebanon with Hezbollah. So they're just doing maximum terrorism without even sending troops. At this point, we're basically doing Hiroshima and Nagasaki for the sake of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. No threat of like actual ground movement, ground mobilization at all. We're just doing it for fun. Felix described Israel's military strategy in Gaza as the equivalent of throwing a tantrum with nuclear armed states military. It's the same with America and Iran now. Yeah. And for that reason, it's more so a game of attrition. Like, will Israeli defenses diminish to such a significant level that Iran is more successful at striking both military targets and strategic targets inside of Israel before Israel decides to apply the Dahiyya Doctrine on Iran? And at what point? I mean, I worry that Israel will escalate up the nuclear ladder if they're, openly threatening to do the Dahiyya Doctrine in Iran anyway. And this has been the calculation from the start.
Hormuz being opened.
That's right.
Again, the Iranians have these small vessels where they use mine laying vessels, for example, to try and disrupt billions of dollars worth of oil trade through the Strait. And it's something that they can continue to do, and it's very inexpensive for Iran, but can be very expensive for the international energy markets. And the president understands this. And so the primary thing that he talked about was the Strait of Hormuz. He also said there are 15 other points, but he does believe that he'll be able to get an agreement with the Iranian regime. I think the important part here, too, is the negotiating team that the president has. We're talking about U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. If you think back to last year, the entire region didn't think a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas was possible. And ultimately, the president was able to send his special envoy to the region, send Jared Kushner to the region, and go to Egypt and get a deal that everyone said wasn't possible. And I think that is the sentiment now. Ultimately, there will be some sort of negotiated settlement. The president's really just giving the Iranians a chance right now in order to stop things right here, because the United States has more U.S. forces in the region. The president's been very clear he's willing to move more forces to the Middle East if needed, but there are already tens of thousands of U.S. forces currently in the Middle East. And as we saw last night, U.S. Special Forces have the ability, hundreds of them, to go into Iranian territory to conduct operations and successfully leave the country without anyone being killed or very serious injuries happening to those forces. And again, this is also a message of deterrence, I am told. I spoke with a senior U.S. official earlier today who said only the United States of America has the capability to do what is being done right now in Iran. And the president has a variety of options on the table to choose from as it relates to how this conflict is going to move forward. And as we talked about earlier, it appears the president is giving the Iranians until tomorrow to make a good faith agreement, or there will be a price to pay, according to the president, and that will be Iran's power grid and bridges. And he even described it to me as Power Plant Day and Bridge Day, because he said this will be a concerted effort to strike at the heart of the regime and their infrastructure if they're unwilling to come to the table and make a good faith deal.
Well, Trey, your report gives me a lot of hope. I mean, we've all been praying for peace and hopefully a negotiation, a way out of this. Did the president give you any indication as to who is leading these negotiations? My understanding is that last week the Iranians said, we want to deal with J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance was beginning negotiations with somebody on the Iranian side, and then that person we killed, and I think, or injured, and then some of his family was killed, if I'm correct. Correct me if I'm wrong. So who is leading the negotiations, and who are they negotiating with? Because part of the problem is if you kill so many of the leaders, you're not left with a lot of people to negotiate.
Yeah, I want to be careful with my reporting here, but I can tell you I spoke with President Trump both on and off the record. We talked for about 15 minutes.
I understand.
And he told me that the current negotiators from the Iranian side have been granted limited amnesty right now. They're not going to kill them as these negotiations continue. And that's something that the Iranians requested and the president was willing to grant, given the fact that he is controlling the scope of these negotiations right now. But I think the president also talked about how the Iranians are negotiating. And this was the thing that I drew from the conversation, is that the Iranians like to drag their feet in these negotiations. And the president basically, through that strike on a key bridge in Iran last week, was trying to send a message to them that they're either going to make a deal or they're going to face consequences for not making a deal.
Dude, sandwashing Trump in this regard is so dumb, too, because it's like, yeah, you're talking about negotiating with a guy who has a fucking gun to the head of your family and has like killed a bunch of your family members already and is going down the line and just like shooting them one by one, while simultaneously saying, come on, let's have a good faith negotiation. Come on, let's have a good faith negotiation. It's like talking to a psychopath. This is not a negotiation. This is a president threatening to consistently do war crimes in the process of doing war crimes.